Hi guys, and welcome to your first Mrs. D Explains. So, I've asked you to look at the origins of psychology. It's on page 104 and 105 of your course textbook. Right, so in the beginning, psychology is a very new science. In relative to physics and chemistry and biology, it's not been around that long. Its roots are in the 17th and 19th century, and it was in philosophy. Now, some of you may have heard of René Descartes and his concept of Cartesian dualism, which in simple means that the mind and the body are separate entities. So let me just tell you a little bit more about Descartes. Descartes was a philosopher, he was a mathematician, and in fact, he invented a lot of the scientific laws that we have today. However, he had real difficulty in proving them, that they were essentially correct, and so therefore he wasn't really recognised for them. He then did figure out that everything you have to know is actually based completely on belief, and argued the point, I think, therefore I am, which I think some of you may have heard of. There's a lovely little video on your Take It Further activity you can watch on this. What is Cartesian dualism? So basically, Cartesian dualism is that he believed that the mind and the body were two separate entities. But the mind could not exist outside the body, and the body could not think. Right? Descartes was starting to think about evidence and needing to understand how we thought and how that impacted on our body. Then we got John Locke. Now, John Locke came up with a concept of empiricism. So empiricism, is the ability to observe, to see firsthand the evidence that something is real. And this was a big influence on the emergence of psychology as a science. Then you've got my ever favourite Charles Darwin and the theories of evolution, and how again he started to use evidence to build his theory about how we evolved from apes. But the person who's often known as the father of psychology is Wilhelm Wundt. He opened his first psychology lab in Leipzig in Germany, and his idea was something called structuralism, where he was trying to break down the mind into its constitution parts, so into structural parts or structural bits. He came up with this idea, which he called introspection. So introspection means looking into, and basically he asked his participants to reflect on their own cognitive thought processes and write them down and describe them. He established psychology as science by using this scientific method, by basically saying, let's write down everything you could think about. But introspection relies primarily on non-observable responses, and although participants can report conscious experiences, they're unable to comment on unconscious factors. So I think if I asked you to write down everything that was going on in your head, you might be inclined to actually not tell me everything. Or you might have feelings that you don't even know are actually there. So introspection produced data was very subjective, and it varied greatly from person to person. So it became very difficult to establish general principles. This means that introspection experimental results are not very reliable. In contrast, early behaviourists such as Pavlov and Thorndike were achieving reliable data and producing results that they could generalise to all human beings. So introspection may not be particularly scientific, but it is still used today. For example, Griffiths used introspection to study gamblers while he asked them to think out aloud. Chisholm, I can't say it, and Hunter used introspection to study happiness. But again, it is not something that we use widely in psychological research today. Then along came Watson. Now, Watson had a really big problem with introspection because it was subjective. It was entirely different for each person, and people could lie about what they were thinking. It also focused on an internal mental processes, which we cannot measure, we cannot observe. So you could think something and you could tell me what you think, but I can't actually see you thinking it. I can't be sure that you're telling me the truth. And third, the behaviourist approach was born, and with it the emergence of psychology as a science. So Watson really wanted to try and do lab experiments, try and bring in a much more rigorous scientific method, being empirical, being able to observe things. So it was really the behaviourists that brought about scientific method in psychology as we know it today. They brought about lab experiments and really put in that psychological experimental method that you're going to be looking about. Even more today, psychology is felt more of a science because the cognitive approach has really been able to really study those internal mental processes, and it's now seen as a highly legitimate and highly scientific because we don't have to make an inference. Now, just to clarify, an inference is where you make an assumption about what somebody's thinking by their behaviour or by other things that they may say. But today we can look and read the electrical activity in your brain, the blood flow in your brain using MRIs and EEGs, and this allows us to really know what you're thinking by understanding how the different parts of the brain work. So actually psychology has moved further with advances in technology to make it a much more scientific process. Okay, any questions? Post them in Ed Bodo. Thank you.